Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Happy Halloween. We've got a good topic for you today. Let's do it. When's a time you've had a gut feeling that later on saved your life? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. One day in kindergarten, my lunch kit included my dad's work thermos. It was charcoal gray, and I was kind of proud to use something that was usually just for adults and not my usual plastic cartoon character container. When it was lunchtime, we all pulled out our lunch kits and drinks. While doing so, I knocked the thermos off the table and it hit the floor. When I picked it up and placed it on the table, I thought it was pretty neat that even after hours at school, the ice still inside was frozen, as you could hear it when moving the container. For some reason, I kept trying to get my teacher's attention to show him how the ice was still frozen and floating in my drink. She understandably wasn't as excited as I was, so she blew me off. I kept at it over and over, and she finally relented, unscrewing the cap to see my oh-so-exciting drink. When she had opened it, she quickly pulled it away from my view and asked me if I'd drank any of it. I hadn't, and told her so, but was very confused. She explained that the thermos was lined with glass that shattered when I dropped it, and the icy clinking noise came from the glass shards inside. I still don't understand why I kept nagging her to see my dumb thermos, but it's scary to imagine drinking from it. I had just gotten a massage in central Brussels and was about to go eat something, but something just didn't feel right that evening, so I took the bus home instead. I did hear some loud bangs as I took my seat, but thought it was just my imagination. About 30 minutes later, my phone blew up from calls from friends and family, because just as I had hopped on the bus, a mental case was targeting people wearing Swedish colors where I had just been, while I was wearing Swedish colors. It happened about a year ago. 2 of my kinsmen tragically lost their lives. It didn't save my life, but my grandma's. I was home alone with my grandparents. It was early in the morning, and I got up to help them with something. I hadn't slept a lot the night before, so I told my grandma I was going back to sleep. I stayed in my bed for about 15 to 20 minutes, but I couldn't sleep. It was like something in the back of my mind stopped me, and it felt like I couldn't stay in my room anymore. I got up and went back into the kitchen where my grandma was. She had just finished cooking breakfast and sat down in her chair. She didn't look well, so I was about to measure her blood pressure, but I couldn't. She just fell limp and couldn't breathe. I couldn't hear her pulse either, so I grabbed her from the chair and put her down on the floor and performed CPR. She regained consciousness, and a few minutes later the medics came. She's a lot better now, and I'm thankful I didn't sleep that day. February 2021. I was asleep in my truck in the daytime as I worked nights. For no reason at all, I woke up early in the afternoon, which was unusual for me. It also annoyed me as if it disrupted my sleep, and I really need to be well rested to drive all night. I couldn't understand why I suddenly jolted awake and couldn't go back to sleep at an unusual time, around 5 to 10 minutes later. My window wipers switched on, despite the fact that the keys were out of the ignition and thus impossible to activate. I opened my curtains to investigate and heard cackling noises. Then the smoke started pouring out of the air vents. I quickly threw some clothes on and hopped out, but the cab filled up with smoke in seconds. As I jumped out, I saw an orange glow. The fire began in the fuse box, melted through the dash, and had spread to where the curtains were seconds before. I used the fire extinguisher to put the fire out. I had slept through World War III, especially after a night shift. I have no idea what woke me that afternoon, but if I hadn't, then I never would have woken up again. The fire spread in a matter of seconds, and the closed fabric blinds surrounding me wouldn't have helped. Not going with my friends to the finish line at the local marathon. Because I couldn't go, none of my friends went either. About 30 minutes later, a roommate came running through the halls covered in sweat. He said he started running when the bombs went off. It was Boston in 2013. I packed my backpack and left the hostel. I was heading for the train. I had 20 minutes to make the connection. Something told me to stop and get the next train. A terrorist bomb went off 10 minutes later. It killed and injured lots of people. I caught a bus, 1979. I paid attention to that feeling ever since. Greenwood Park Mall, Indiana shooting. My wife and I needed to go to the mall for a few things one weekend. We typically would go to Greenwood Park, as it is, at least was, a typically safe mall with a lot of different stores. It's about a 45-minute drive for us, so we typically make a day of it and go have fun and eat in the food court. Normally, we would have gone on Sunday, but I, for some reason, decided the yard work today, let's go today, on Saturday, July 16, 2022. The next day, July 17, 2022, a gunman opened fire in the food court, killing 3 and injuring 2 before being taken out by a civilian legally carrying a concealed firearm. Had we decided to do the yard work and go the next day, we very well could have been eating in the food court when the shooting happened. I didn't go to green light when it changed. I always do. I'm quick off the line. I like driving. One time I just didn't. I sat there for a second. A moment goes by and a Dodge Durango with the driver on the phone blasts through a red light. I was in my Honda Del Sol. It would have annihilated me. I was at a county fair and we were walking around the cows. As I was walking, there was a cow that I had a bad feeling about. Something wasn't right and I paused. My spouse looked at me. Why are we stopping? And I said, look at that cow. The path we were walking down had the cow's asses facing us. As I pointed out the cow that was less than 20 feet away, it lifted its tail and started to shit. Before the first plop of shit hit the floor, the cow coughed and shit went flying across the path and sprayed everyone within 10 feet of it. I looked on in horror at the people screaming covered in cow shit. If I didn't stop right when I did, I would have been at the precise height of that cow's ass for a headshot. I would have freaking died. That is pretty wild and also very fortunate. So good on your sister for encouraging your mom, 1, not to smoke, and 2, not to smoke in a bomb. So great. This one is weird and a bit spooky, but when I was around 10, me, my mom, and my sister had gone to pick up a new propane canister from the store, and we were heading to a shopping center to get haircuts. While we were in the turning lane in the strip mall, my mom popped a cigarette into her mouth and was able to light it. My sister said, Mom, we're here, what's the point? That in and of itself was out of character for my sister, but for my mom to actually listen and put it away in retrospect, ludicrous. But listen she did. After about 10 minutes, we were in the salon and everyone started looking out the window and rubbernecking. A fire truck, full lights and down blazing, had come screaming into the parking lot. We realized pretty quickly that they were surrounding my mom's car. Apparently, someone had called 911 saying they smelled propane and had identified it as coming from my mom's car. We rush out, and they keep us back away. We explain it's our car and hand them the keys so they can get it. After a couple of minutes of evaluation, the firefighters came to us and explained that the tank had a major leak, and they had to dispose of it. That's when the gravity of my sister stopping my mom from lighting up hit us like a ton of bricks. We told the firefighters the story, and the look on their faces was a lot. The head fireman looked a bit unsteady and told my mom that based on the leak they found, after about 5 minutes of the gas escaping, we had created a bomb essentially. We had been in the car 5 to 7 minutes after picking up and heading to the salon. He explained that if she had lit that cigarette, we would have exploded right there in the turning lane. I was about 8 and we were taking a family trip up north when I suddenly started not feeling good. I screamed and screamed for us not to go. They ignored me, of course. Finally, I begged them to not let me go to the bathroom. They were not happy about it, but I agreed and stopped at a Kmart. Not 2 minutes into the Kmart, a tornado went through and wiped out the entire town we were in. The Kmart was mostly good, though. Driving the same way to work I always did at a time, 5 a.m., no traffic. Coming up to an intersection, school and neighborhoods on the right, more neighborhoods on the left, 25-mile-per-hour road. I hit my brakes for literally no reason. Slowed down from 50 to 25. Psycho with no headlights and an all-black car and deep tinted windows flies through the red light at 80 plus miles per hour. Would have T-boned me and my little Mazda 3 on the driver's side. It was a big part of why my next vehicle was a large truck. I was once driving my family back from the beach in New Zealand, and I was rounding this blind corner on a very twisty road, and I had this weird feeling to go super tight to the outside of the road. So I was well over the edge line when this car going super fast, cutting the corner in the middle of the road, zoomed past us. It would have totally been a head-on collision had I been driving normally in the lane. There was like a hushed silence, and my brother was like, "How did you know to be out of the way?" When you know, you know. During one of my shifts of delivering pizza, we had 2 orders come in around midnight. We were open until 1. Back then it was a mostly cash business. The first stop was in a very sketchy area, and the second was about maybe a quarter mile down the road, if not closer, to another apartment complex. I got to the first stop, and the person at the door seemed odd. I'm walking back to the car, and a few guys rolled up on me, asking some innocent type of questions. Not wanting to offend, I answered them concisely and proceeded on my way to the next stop. Unfortunately, I had to park a bit away and walk around the building to get to the door. But now I'm on high alert, because the whole previous situation left me feeling uneasy and vulnerable. I quickly raced my way to the door, dropped off the food, and ran back to my car. I get in, quickly start it up, and throw it in reverse. The next thing I noticed is the same 3 guys surrounding my car with a gun in my face. I floored it in reverse, threw it into first, and hauled ass out of there while ducking underneath the doors and steering wheel. Obviously, they were there to rob me by whatever means necessary, and got cold feet on their first probable attempt. This was 14-ish years ago, and an experience I'll never forget. Shit scared me for a while. Stationary at lights. Something felt often eerie, so I looked into my rearview mirror to see a woman still doing 30 miles an hour into my rear bumper. What felt like 1/10,000th of a second between registering and acting, I stood on the brakes. A kid around 8 was crossing the road and directly in front of my car. He got a little bumped and ran away. Had my gut not told me to look up and stand on the brakes, he would have died. Back about 15 years ago, I woke up super early one morning with the worst headache I had ever had. I knew immediately that I needed to throw up. I assumed this was a migraine because of the nausea, but it didn't get any better. As I lay on the bathroom floor vomiting regularly, I suddenly had the strong feeling that if I didn't get to the hospital, my 17-year-old son was going to find me here dead when he wakes up. So I dragged myself to my feet, stumbled to the door of my son's room, and told him that I needed him to call 911 because I was sick. I then lay down on my bed. I learned later that I'd had a seizure and my son had to follow the 911 operator's instructions as what to do. Anyway, the ambulance came, they got me to the hospital, and it turned out that I had a leaking brain aneurysm. Had it ruptured, I would have died at age 49. I'm very glad I listened to that little voice. About 35 years ago, I was on a cross-country trip with my buddies. We were taking turns driving on 8-hour shifts, 2 in the front, 2 in the back sleeping. Somewhere in Wyoming, I wake up in the back seat and tell the driver, I just had a dream that over the next hill we'll see a herd of deer, be careful. Thankfully, my buddy listened to me. Within a mile, we see more than 100 deer right in the middle of this desolate highway. He stopped in time. Never saw another deer the whole drive. I was parked in front of a business one time and something told me to open my rear car door and lean in. As I did, a truck pulling a trailer took the turn too tight at the corner and snagged a power pole. The high-tension line landed behind my car. The next pole down fell the opposite way, causing the line to jump over my car. Would have taken my head off if I hadn't leaned into my back seat. I heard that in my head plain as day. The other pole that fell landed directly on a brand new outfit at the sheriff's department. That dude wasn't having the best of days. So I was at work, put on my safety goggles and hearing protection like a good boy, plugged the angle grinder into the socket, and just before I pushed down the button, I randomly got the feeling to watch behind me. There was a 5-liter canister of thinner with the lid unscrewed and a couple of soaked rags on the workbench behind me. Dipshit coworker washed his hands with it after painting and never cleaned up. Needless to say, some shouting may have taken place afterwards. I stopped to fully scrape off my windshield instead of just making a little hole because I was tired of the entire day and took the extra 3 minutes to chip off the frost completely before leaving work. On my way back home up the mountain highway, I came upon the immediate aftermath of a wrong-way driver incident that happened minutes prior. The crash ended up totaling a smaller Honda, and the SUV also involved was flipped upside down in the nearby drainage. Police were already on the scene. As luck would have it, they were already responding to a trespass call in the area. One died and one was airlifted. If I had left on time, I have no doubt it would have been me smeared on the highway. I drove the speed limit home and had my head on a swivel for deer. 29 October 2005. I just realized it was 19 years and 2 days to this day. I was visiting New Delhi as a prospective college student after spending a day doing a campus tour with my family. We were free the next day, so my parents decided they wanted to go sightseeing around Delhi. I wasn't in the mood to go, but my parents wouldn't hear it. A combination of sulking and I just want to go back to the hotel all day while being dragged around to visit tourist sites. In the evening, my mom and aunt decided to go to this famous Sarojini market for Diwali shopping, while Dad would babysit me and my younger brother in the van. Now, the I just want to go back feeling had turned into, I really think we should leave right now, but who's listening to me, right? So I threw a massive tantrum, and Dad had to go fetch Mom and Aunt so we could leave. When we got back to the room and switched the TV on, the visuals of the same market were now covered in debris and blood, and it was right where our van was parked earlier. I moved to Japan after college to teach English. My first week there, I was being driven around town by members of the local board of education, showing me the different schools I would be teaching at. I was sitting in the back seat, not wearing my seatbelt. It was the 2000s, and I feel back then no one wore seatbelts in the back seat. At least I never did. But a few miles into our drive, I was overcome with this feeling to buckle up. Just moments after putting on my seatbelt, we were rear-ended while making a turn, and our Board of Education van flipped several times and landed off the road and on its side. Thankfully, I was buckled in and mostly unharmed, so I was able to unbuckle and open the sliding back door, which was now engulfed entirely in flames. I'll never forget just staring at the van as it burned, thinking about how if I didn't have this feeling to buckle up, I could have been severely injured or even dead. I've never not worn a seatbelt again. My boyfriend was driving me home. We were going pretty quick on some back roads to make my curfew. I got a chill and yelled at him to hit the brake out of nowhere. He did. We skidded to a stop and our seatbelts locked up. Then 6 very large deer started crossing the road at that moment. That little Honda Civic would have been destroyed. A few weeks later, I did it to him a second time. After taking the back roads, we have to turn onto a major state route. It was dark, and there was one car in the distance. We had plenty of time to pull out in front of them, plenty. But I said no. I wanted us to wait because I had a bad feeling. They pass us, and we pull out behind them. Not even a mile down the road, an oncoming truck pulls a random Yui, Dukes of Hazzard style, and T-bones the car in front of us. The truck driver was drunk. My boyfriend was pretty freaked out. He's my husband now and always listens when I tell him something seems off. It saved our butts a few times now. I used to work as a chemical operator for a company that made sulfuric acid reagents and other extremely corrosive compounds. I've been training a new hire for the past 3 months. We're working on part of the process that is pretty straightforward. We're just checking the lines and opening a valve. During this step, most of the experienced guys don't dress up in full bodysuit or personal protective equipment because of laziness. Keep in mind, the company I worked for didn't have the most strict safety standards. But because I was training a new guy and wanted to set a good example, I made sure we both fully garbed up. Also, people do stupid things sometimes. However, there was something wrong with the pressure that day. When I opened the valve, a glass hole cover literally exploded. We were sprayed with sulfuric acid head to toe. Thankfully, we were wearing full PPE. We went over to the emergency shower and rinsed each other off. I got a lot of positive remarks from upper management for that day for following safety standards, even though someone completely effed up the process. Working EMS as an EMT, I got a call priority 1 to overdose with naloxone already administered. Showed up same time as FD, paramedic, to a tiny apartment with the guy on the ground butt naked around a super narrow hallway. I walked a few steps in first, but something in me told me to step out before rounding the corner. Got joked out by the firefighter on scene with, "Aw, you scared?" in a joking manner. I know the firefighter. The paramedic walked in and noped right the fuck out and said there's a machete near the patient. I was probably 6 or 7 playing in a sandpit in my family's side yard under an absolutely massive poplar tree, probably 80 to 100 feet tall. It wasn't a particularly windy day, but I distinctly remember getting a feeling that I needed to go inside now. Before I got to the door, a decent-sized branch fell from the top of the tree and embedded itself broken side down deep in the sand right where I previously was. I would have been a grisly discovery for my family, and I was old enough to be pretty shaken, cemented early on that I should listen to the vibes, I guess.